amid a full-scale public relations crisis over its policy of forcibly separating children from their parents. Donald Trump today reversed course, signing a new executive order ending that policy in just the last hour.
We're signing an executive order I consider to be a very important executive order. It's about keeping families together while at the same time being sure that we have a very powerful, very strong border, and border security will be equal, if not greater, than previously. So we're going to have strong, very strong borders, but we're going to keep the families together. I didn't like the sight or the feeling of families being separated. There's a problem that's gone on for many years, as you know, through many administrations, and we're working very hard on immigration. It's been just left out in the cold. Ivanka feels very strongly. My wife feels very strongly about it. I feel very strongly about it. I think anybody with a heart would feel very strongly about it. We don't like to see families separated. At the same time, we don't want people coming into our country illegally. This takes care of the problem.
Trump halting a policy that he defended as recently as this morning and that aides confirm he still believes in, only after a congressional revolt on Capitol Hill that included dozens of Republicans, threats of boycotts from companies that do business with the federal government, and withering criticism from even some of the friendliest pro-Trump voices in the media. The announcement came 14 and a half hours after the Associated Press broke the news that the Trump administration has set up at least 3 tender age shelters where it can lock up babies and other young children. Doctors and lawyers who visited those shelters said the children were hysterical, crying and acting out. Many of them are under the age of 5, and some are so young they've not yet learned to talk. Locked up sounds a lot like jail for babies. Let that sink in. The New York Times reporting, quote, while Mr. Trump's actions appear to stop short of calls for an end to the zero-tolerance policy, it would be a remarkable retreat for the president, who has steadfastly refused to apologize in almost any other context. And it would be a testament to the political power of the images of the immigrant children to move public opinion. People close to the president said he remains convinced that his immigration policies are appropriate and necessary. But Mr. Trump is said to be increasingly frustrated by the criticism he's getting and aware that he is boxed in by the legal argument his administration has made. Speaking of boxes, here's the one Trump put himself in over the last couple of days.
Wait, you can't do it through an executive order. We have to get the Democrats to go ahead and work with us. I say it's very strongly the Democrats' fault. All we need is good legislation, and we can have it taken care of. We can do this very quickly if the Democrats come to the table.
Here to take us through the day's extraordinary developments, NBC's Jacob Soboroff is in McAllen, Texas. NBC's Cal Perry is in the border town of Tornillo, Texas, near a so-called tent city. Also, NBC News Chief White House correspondent Hallie Jackson joins us. Former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance is here, and with us at the table, John Heilemann, NBC News and MSNBC National Affairs analyst, and Zerlina Maxwell, Director of Progressive Programming for SiriusXM. Hallie Jackson, I'm struck by some of the words the president used. He talked about not liking to see the images of those families. We know that the strike in Syria came after he saw the images of children who were gassed. Multiple news organizations have reported that the PDB includes a lot of charts and graphs. We know this president processes information visually, but we also know he's incredibly focused on negative press. What was the tipping point for the president in this complete about-face?
And it is a reversal, Nicole. Let's not call it anything else than what it is for this president, despite his insistence that he will continue this zero-tolerance policy, which is what triggered the higher rate of family separations in the first place. You mentioned 2 things that I think have an interesting intersection here: visuals and negative coverage. This was the apex of both of those things, in large part for Donald Trump. Not negative because the media was trying to make it negative, but negative because the president's closest allies on Capitol Hill, people that have stood up for him time and time and time again, as I've watched every day of this administration, came out and said, this is wrong, the White House needs to change it. The president was hearing those voices, he was seeing those pictures, hearing that audio, and he was hearing, I think importantly, Nicole, from both Ivanka Trump and Melania Trump. Now, you referenced the situation in Syria. Remember who was also a voice then that the president talked about? His daughter, his senior advisor, Ivanka Trump, at that time of the kids being gassed, was talking about how disturbing she found those images. Now, Ivanka Trump didn't actually say that publicly. She did not come out and take a stand publicly in opposition to this policy until after the president signed that executive order, unlike Melania Trump, the first lady, who did. But here's the bottom line, Nicole. The political pressure built so much, it became so intense, along with the personal pressure from the president's family, that ultimately he signed this EO. Now, don't forget what happens in 3 hours from now. President goes to Minnesota. He's going to stand in front of a crowd of big supporters who are going to be cheering him on every step of the way. I imagine, based on my coverage of this president and during the campaign, that he is going to talk at length about the executive order that he signed. He will cast it as him being, as he did today, compassionate and helping these families because he didn't like, as he said, these sights and feelings, to use his words of this. And he's going to say he didn't back down, as he said today, is the prediction based on our reporting. Again, this is a policy the president himself put in place. 5 days ago, you played that clip very quickly, but it's worth highlighting. He said an executive action could not fix this. I was just up inside the West Wing, and I asked one official, I said, what changed? Why, did you get new legal advice? Did you get new legal guidance? What happened? And there was no solid answer on that one, Nicole. So we're still going to report out more there. But it is worth noting how quickly this all happened.
Jacob Soboroff, you've been doing some of the most extraordinary reporting anywhere and asking the questions that we finally got one of the answers to last night. Where are the girls? Where are the babies? Last night, just before 10 p.m., just before Rachel Maddow's hour ended, we got our answer. The babies are in 3 tender age shelters for babies. Can you talk about the ground truth, where you are?
Well, here's the thing, Nicole. We know where some of the babies are. They're the only 3 tender age, which is a strange term, but it's the only. Those are the only 3 shelters of tender age babies, infants, toddlers that we know about. They certainly aren't the only ones, and we know that there are 100 shelters run by HHS across the entire country, across 17 states. And we've been hearing reports today, as Chris Hayes was just mentioning in the previous hour, all the way up to New York State, where young children might be located. So there are 2,500 kids dispersed throughout the United States of America, not just here in South Texas, including the same kind of toddlers that I saw in that detention facility here in McAllen. And we don't know where they are. Not only do we not know where they are, we don't know if they will ever be reunited with their parents again, because according to a former ICE official who talked to Julia Ainsley, they could become essentially immigrant orphans. Those parents could already be deported for all we know and not have the resources to come back and find those children. So the sickening images and feelings that many of us felt over the course of the last week or so haven't gone away, and we should remember that when we watch this signing ceremony today.
Jacob, let me put up the video. We have some of that video, what you're referencing. This is from New York One, video of children being brought to New York. I believe this was after midnight last night. So here are some of the girls and some of the children.
There you go. Exactly.
Let me ask you about this sort of sense from the president that he fixed this. There are still thousands of children, as you just said, who may never be reunited with their parents. What is the process now? Even if the practice stops, there are still thousands of children separated from their parents who are on their way to deportation. What is the process? What are people supposed to do? I was thinking, we can't always keep track of people that we release from Gitmo, and they're terrorists. So how are we going to reunite
there is no
parents
process.
and right?
I mean, there is no process. This has never been done before. There wasn't really an official process when this zero tolerance policy was even in place. All there was a piece of paper that said call the 1-800 number and push 1 for English and 2 for Spanish, and we're going to connect you with somebody who can hopefully find your child at one of these shelters once you get out of prison or ICE detention or whatever the case may be. So there's certainly no process for going back in time and finding those kids that are inside those shelters. I was just thinking about what happens to the kids today that have been separated from their parents already, and they're sitting in the detention center here in McAllen or one of the detention centers across the country, and they're caught in this limbo between when the executive order was signed and the policy stopped, and they're still in detention. How do you reunite with those children? Where do they go?
And Cal Perry, let me bring you in on that question. Have you pick up the thread and answer this? These are people who, in the case of the asylum seekers, committed no crime at all. They came to a country that used to be a beacon for freedom, that used to accept people coming to this country seeking asylum. So the fact that they're being treated in this manner, that their children were ripped from their arms, and now they stand a pretty serious risk of never being reunited with their very young children in some instances. Where do we go from here?
and the kids are alone. We've seen 2 buses have come in just in the past hour packed with kids. And here's the other thing. The other thing that I just can't shake is that everyone is lying. I mean, the president's lying. The heads of the agencies are lying. I've been lied to by the border officers here. We've been pushed around all day. We were told, our crew was told Saturday night, oh, there's nothing happening here. There's no tents here. There's at least 18 tents. There's at least 400 kids in this wired compound behind me. There's not a plan, really, on how to feed them, how to get them water, how to get them ice. I saw a party ice truck arrive last night. So the process is not in place, as Jacob is saying. I mean, the process is just not there to handle the influx of what we've seen because of the policy that's been put in place. This tent city would not exist if the policy hadn't changed on behalf of the president. What happens now, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in the day, it's quite possible that some of these kids, whether or not they're reunited with their parents, are going to end up on Air Force bases across the south of this country. Those are incredibly inhospitable places, and those are the last places that we want to take someone who's just come to this country and say, welcome to America, welcome to Fort Bliss.
Let me, Cal, you mentioned people that have lied. Let me show you some of those people. Let's talk about that on the other side.
And I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government because God has ordained the government for his purposes.
I can say that it is very biblical to enforce the law. That is actually repeated a number of times throughout the Bible. But the separation of illegal alien families is the product of the same legal loopholes that Democrats refuse to close. And these laws are the same that have been on the books for over a decade. And the president is simply enforcing them.
Congress and the courts created this problem, and Congress alone can fix it. This administration did not create a policy of separating families at the border.
So, Cal, let's fact check that together. The separation of illegal alien families is a product of legal loopholes that Democrats refuse to close. Not true, from Sarah Sanders. Secretary Nielsen, Congress and the courts created this system. Congress alone can fix it. Not true. Secretary Nielsen, also, this administration did not create a policy of separating the families at the border. Yes, it did. So can you talk about how all these individuals were thrown under the bus in some ways by the president going out and doing exactly what they've insisted for days they couldn't do?
And many, many more, right? A minimum age of 4 years old to be separated from your family. And then we see pictures of toddlers. It's theater. And the concern is really, I think, for many people, I'm sure for yourself included, it seems to me that the president just wants to move past the theater. Take Syria, for example. Those airstrikes really did prop up Bashar al-Assad. They really did make him the most powerful force in Syria. And they proved that as long as the Russians are there, the Americans can only do so much. It feels like this executive order, and again, I will wait to see what it really is, feels like the president is trying to push past the drama that is us on television saying that this is unacceptable. You know, I said this to you in an email. I come from covering these things overseas where governments lie to me all the time. And I just have to say, you know, being here and assisting people like Jacob on this story, everyone is lying. It's crazy. It's crazy, Nicole.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.